Hi, this is Newt. Due to the virus, I'm recording from home, so you may notice a difference in audio quality. On this episode of Newt's World, it's really important to remember what Vice President Biden promised.
Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes.
What you just heard is Vice President Joe Biden in the first presidential debate on September 29th, telling the American people that he would not declare victory until the election is independently certified. But when the liberal news media called Pennsylvania for Joe Biden on Saturday, November 7th, Biden held a party in Delaware that night to claim victory. And I want everyone to understand that this election is not over until every legal vote is counted and the states go through their certification process. This is vital. We have to correct the voting system and get rid of the fraud before the next election. If we don't root out the problems like transparency and vote counting, where each side should be in the room as observers, or dead people casting ballots, or people double voting through an absentee ballot and in person, we will never be able to ensure credible election outcomes in the future. At the present time, 70% of the Republicans tell Rasmussen that they do not believe in the outcome of the election. Now, that's a level of deep distrust that is a threat to the very stability of our system. And that's why it's important that we go through a constitutional process. Because the truth is that we are a constitutional country. We're not a mob-ruled mass democracy where things change every time instantly that some group wants it to. So the first thing I want everyone to understand is that there is a clear constitutional process that we have to follow. The process was set up by our founders, who had thought a great deal about how to have honest elections and about how to have an executive, the president, who was picked in such a way that you guaranteed wisdom rather than passion, and you had a system rather than a mob. For those who question whether we should use the Electoral College anymore, the answer is yes. It was established by the Constitution to, in fact, be a buffer between the popular will and the ultimate result. The Founding Fathers established the Electoral College and the Constitution in part as a compromise between those who wanted a popular vote and those who simply wanted Congress to elect the president. So what they did is they created the whole concept of you will vote and the winner in your state will have electors, and the electors will then go to Washington, and together the electors will pick the next president. Article 2 of the Constitution and the 12th Amendment both refer to electors. Neither refers to the Electoral College. But the Electoral College design, the whole process, is part of the original structure of the Constitution. In fact, it would be necessary to pass a constitutional amendment to change this system. The ratification of the 12th Amendment, the expansion of voting rights, and the states' use of the popular vote to determine who will be appointed as electors have each substantially changed the original process. Many different proposals to alter the presidential election process have been offered over the years, such as direct nationwide election by the eligible voters. But none has been passed by Congress. None has been sent to the states for ratification as a constitutional amendment. Under the most common method for amending the Constitution, an amendment must be proposed by a 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress and ratified by 3/4 of the states. And that has not happened because overall there's been a sense of stability in the way the system has worked now for well over 230 years. You know, the process has a series of key dates. On December the 14th, 2020, there will be a meeting of the electors in every state, and they will send certificates of their vote to the National Archives and Records Administration. That's the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, set by the Constitution. The electors meet in their respective states to select the President and Vice President of the United States. No constitutional provision or federal law requires electors to vote in accordance with the popular vote in those states. The Supreme Court decided in 2020 that states can enact requirements on how electors vote. The Electoral College website lists the states that we are aware of that have laws to bind electors. If you really want to know more about this, go to archives.gov/electoral-college. Now, after that meeting, on December 23rd, 2020, that's the deadline for receipt of electoral votes at the National Archives and Records Administration, no later than 9 days after the meeting of the electors. The President of the Senate and the archivist should have the electoral votes in hand by December 23rd, 2020. If votes are lost or delayed, the archivist may take extraordinary measures to retrieve duplicate originals. On or before January 3rd of 2021, the certificates are transferred to the Congress. The new Congress, comes in on January 3rd, both the House and the Senate. So as they're getting organized, the archivist transmits sets of certificates to Congress as requested. This generally happens when the Senate does not receive its set of certificates on time. At that point, they communicate. The transfer normally occurs in late December or early January, when the National Archives and Records Administration Office of the Federal Register's legal staff meets with representatives of the Secretary of the Senate and the Clerk of the House. So now the process is building momentum and is doing so in a very orderly, structured way. On January 6th, the electoral votes are counted in Congress. The Congress meets in joint session to count the electoral votes. The President of the Senate is the presiding officer. If a senator and a House member jointly submit an objection, each House would retire to its chamber to consider it, and that is a one-day process. The President and Vice President must achieve a majority of 2 electoral votes, 270, to be elected. In the absence of a majority, the House selects the President and the Senate selects the Vice President. In fact, in 1824, there was a huge scandal because the candidates who ran second and third joined together to defeat Andrew Jackson, the candidate who'd run first. Jackson spent 4 years campaigning against what he called a corrupt bargain, and as a result, he won the election 4 years later. But initially, even though he had the most votes, he'd gotten about 40% of the votes. He'd been defeated by a coalition between 2 of his competitors. Now, if a state submits conflicting electoral votes, let's say that a state sends 2 sets of electors, which is what happened in the Gore versus Bush contest of 2000. There was a set of electors sent by the Republicans from Florida and a set of electors sent by the Democrats from Florida. And at that point, the 2 houses acting concurrently may accept or reject them. If they do not agree, the votes of the electors certified by the governor of the state would be counted in Congress. So in the case of what happened in Florida in 2000, the courts had accepted the recount, and the official state delegation sent by the governor was for George W. Bush. But the Gore folks were still contesting this all the way up to the time that they met in Washington, and they actually had an alternative set of delegates. But at the last minute, Gore realized that there was no way he could get to a majority because when the House votes, each state has 1 vote. Now, what that means is that Wyoming has 1 vote and California has 1 vote. And under those circumstances, the Republicans had a majority of the votes, and Gore realized that there was no way he was going to win. And so he finally conceded. Now, this process has been followed by every election, and it'll be no different in 2020. We will not definitively know who the president is until the votes are certified by Congress in January. One of the best explanations I have heard on the process is when Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell took the floor of the Senate on November 9th.
According to preliminary results, voters across the nation elected and re-elected Republican senators to a degree that actually stunned prognosticators. Likewise, the American people seem to have reacted to House Democrats' radicalism and obstruction by shrinking the Speaker's majority and electing more Republicans. And then there's the presidential race. Obviously, no states have yet certified their election results. We have at least one or two states that are already on track for a recount. And I believe the president may have legal challenges underway in at least 5 states. The core principle here is not complicated. In the United States of America, all legal ballots must be counted. Any illegal ballots must not be counted. The process should be transparent or observable by all sides, and the courts are here to work through concerns. Our institutions are actually built for this. We have the system in place to consider concerns, and President Trump is 100% within his rights to look into allegations of irregularities and weigh his legal options. Let's go back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, when Florida came down to a very thin margin, we saw Vice President Gore exhaust the legal system and wait to concede until December. More recently, weeks after the media had called President Bush's reelection in 2004, Democrats baselessly disputed Ohio's electors and delayed the process here in Congress. In 2016, election law saw recounts or legal challenges in several states. If any major irregularities occurred this time of a magnitude that would affect the outcome, then every single American should want them to be brought to light. And if Democrats feel confident they have not occurred, they should have no reason to fear any extra scrutiny. We have the tools and institutions we need to address any concerns. The president has every right to look into allegations and to request recounts under the law. And notably, the Constitution gives no role in this process to wealthy media corporations. The projections and commentary of the press do not get veto power over the legal rights of any citizen, including the President of the United States. Now, more broadly, Mr. President, let's not have any lectures, no lectures about how the President should immediately, cheerfully accept preliminary election results from the same characters who just spent 4 years refusing to accept the validity of the last election, and who insinuated that this one would be illegitimate too, if they lost again. Only if they lost. So let's have no lectures on this subject from that contention.
What does COVID-19 have to do with losing your home? A lot. The FBI reported that since the virus struck, cybercrime is up 75%. It gets worse. The legal title to all our homes are online now. The crime is called home title theft, and it's everywhere. Cyber criminals find the title to your home online, forge your signature on a quitclaim deed, and refile as the new owner of your home. You're off title. They destroy you by taking out loans against your home, steal the cash, and stick you with the payments. You may not know until you get late payment or a foreclosure notice. Home Title Lock protects your home's legal title. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant they detect tampering, they shut it down. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com.
At Qualcomm, we believe in staying connected, and you can see us wherever 5G is helping transform telemedicine, supporting remote education, and powering mobile PCs. The invention age is here. Learn more at Qualcomm.com/inventionage.
What is truly amazing is that despite the constitutional process, despite Joe Biden having committed in the first debate that he would wait for the process and not claim victory prematurely, the news media decided that they would go all out to make sure that we accepted that Trump had lost. Now, at one level, this shouldn't surprise us. Again and again and again, the average has been 93% negative coverage of Trump by the major news media. In fact, a Pew Research study from 2017 found that stories about Trump's first 100 days were 4 times as likely to carry a negative assessment than a positive one. And that was during the period we call a honeymoon. But the Pew Research study said, quote, compared with 3 prior presidencies, coverage of Trump's early days in office moved further away from the focus on the policy agenda, 31% of the stories, compared with 50% for Obama and 65% for Bush, and toward character and leadership. And the evaluations of President Trump were far more negative and less positive than those of his predecessors. So from the very first days, the fix was in. A Pew Research study from August of 2020 found that 9 in 10 Republicans and independents who lean toward the Republican Party say it's at least somewhat likely that social media platforms censor political viewpoints they find objectionable. That's up slightly from 85% in 2018 when Pew last asked the question. Back then, in 2018, more than 8 in 10 Republicans say they have no or not much confidence regarding social media companies' ability to determine which post on their platform should be labeled. On a broad level, a plurality of Americans say that major technology companies tend to support the view of liberals over conservatives rather than conservatives over liberals. That's 43% think that they're liberal, 13% think that they're conservative. But about almost 4 in 10, 39%, say the major tech companies tend to support the views of conservatives and liberals equally. I suspect that's changed a little bit in the last 3 weeks of the campaign when it was so obvious how much those companies were just clearly censoring conservatives. In fact, if you look at it, from May of 2018 to October 16th of 2020, Twitter and Facebook censored Trump 65 times and Biden 0, according to a study by the Media Research Center. In a 24-hour period between mid-morning Thursday, November 5th and Friday, November 6th, Twitter censored 6 of Trump's posts. The posts were not immediately visible. Instead, there was a note attached saying, quote, some of all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civil process. You know, one of the tweets that Trump said, quote, all the recent Biden claimed states will be legally challenged by us for voter fraud and state election fraud. Plenty of proof. Just check out the media. We will win. America first. That's one of the tweets that they decided they would suppress. A couple of other posts from Trump, including all capital posts saying, stop the count, and any vote that came in after Election Day will not be counted. Just pure straight censorship. Now, this was parallel not just for Trump, but it was also, by the way, Rush Limbaugh in one day had 4 out of 6 tweets that were censored. The New York Post had an even more remarkable experience. The Post's primary Twitter account was locked down because its articles about the messages obtained from Hunter Biden's laptop broke the social network's rule against, quote, distribution of hacked material, according to an email the Post received from Twitter. Now, just think about this. The New York Times and the Washington Post routinely print things that are either hacked or stolen. They routinely print things that are often secret. Somehow it's okay because, you know, it's not anti-Biden. Twitter also blocked users from sharing the link to the New York Post article, indicating that Hunter Biden introduced Joe Biden to the Ukrainian businessman. They called the link potentially harmful. You have to ask the question, you know, Twitter thought it was potentially harmful to who? Now, there are at least a half dozen Chinese nationals who are working on censorship, a former Facebook insider told Sohrab Ahmari of the New York Post. I want you to think about that. There is a team of Chinese nationals who are working for Facebook to develop better algorithms for censorship. It's called the Hate Speech Engineering Team. It includes a research scientist based at the Seattle office who earned his master's degree in computer engineering from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing, according to his LinkedIn profile. This is the kind of thing that has to be genuinely frightening. If these big companies start applying to Americans the kind of deliberate distortion and censorship that is routine in China, then we will really have lost a great deal of our freedom and a great deal of our ability to communicate with each other. One of the software engineers used to work for the communist-backed conglomerate Huawei, as well as the Beijing National Railway and Design Institute of Signal and Communications. But the efforts by the big internet companies went beyond that. The founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, donated $400 million to turning out the vote. That money was allocated overwhelmingly only for Democratic areas, which meant that they were helping turn out the Democratic Party's vote to the disadvantage of Republicans in a way which was really, I think, a profound violation of the way the system is supposed to work. So again, you see an example of complete and decisive bias. Let me share with you what we now know as of the time I'm doing this. These are patterns in 6 states that are being investigated. I'm going to go through the 6 states that really are at the heart of this election. These are sort of the contested states. Virtually all the other states, people on both sides agree which ones Trump carried, which ones Biden carried. But you'll see that these states are close and they've had serious voting irregularities. So Pennsylvania, Biden got 49.8%. Trump got 49%. Now, that is out of 6,700,000 votes, a difference of 53,000 votes. And one of the issues they've got is that the mail-in ballots are not being refused if the signatures don't match. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court changed the law and said, quote, "We hold that county boards of election are prohibited from rejecting absentee or mail-in ballots based on signature comparison conducted by county election officials or employees, or as the result of third-party challenges based on signature analysis and comparison." In other words, no matter what the state law was, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just wrote their own law and said, basically, we don't care if it's clear that the 2 signatures are totally different. They still count. The Pennsylvania Attorney General, who's a very, very liberal Democrat, Josh Shapiro, released a statement, quote, "Another win for voters in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court today. Mail-in ballots cannot be rejected based upon signature analysis. Voters who use a mail-in ballot have their identity verified in the initial application, often using a driver's license number. Pennsylvania's voter identification system is safe and secure. We are protecting every eligible vote and ensuring each is counted. Make your plan to vote, and we'll keep doing our work to make sure your voice is heard." This is a liberal Democrat. And what does he say? He's saying, anybody who wants to can pretend to be somebody else. We are not going to check to see whether or not your identity is real. So you now have mail-in ballots with no system of determining who sent it, whether they're a real person or what have you. There's another example in Pennsylvania, which is people who are dead who are on the voting rolls. According to the Public Interest Legal Foundation, they found at least 21,000 apparently deceased registrants on Pennsylvania's voter rolls in the final weeks of the 2020 election cycle. They filed an amended lawsuit against the Pennsylvania Department of State for failing to reasonably maintain voter registration records under federal law. The foundation's amended complaint notes in part, quote, "As of October 7th, 2020, at least 9,212 registrants have been dead for at least 5 years. At least 1,990 registrants have been dead for at least 10 years. and at least 197 registrants have been dead for at least 20 years. Pennsylvania still left the names of more than 21,000 dead individuals in the voter rolls. Now, the fact is, think about this. You have thousands of people who are dead, who are still in the voting rolls, 21,000 dead individuals on the voter rolls in Pennsylvania. There was a famous case in Georgia, maybe part of why I'm so sympathetic to making sure that we count every vote, where a sheriff was elected, and somebody went back and began checking the voting pattern, and they suddenly realized that they had like 100 people who voted in alphabetical order. And they suddenly realized that was impossible. And ultimately, the whole election was thrown out because people just cheated. So that's why when I see 21,000 dead individuals combined with the absolute lack of any kind of identity verification, I immediately become suspicious. And in each of these cases, I want to see a hand canvas where they touch every single ballot with both a Democrat and a Republican standing there watching to see what the real votes were and which of these really are phony. So in my experience, there are times when cheating just plain occurs. For example, in Philadelphia one year, there was a Senate race in which by the time they had looked at the evidence, the judge said it was so clearly corrupt and fraudulent that he stripped from office the Democrat who was guilty and turned it over to the Republican candidate, which was important that year because it changed the balance of power in the Pennsylvania Senate. And here's why it's really important that we have clean, honest rolls. Whether it's people who died or it's people who moved out of state, you don't want to leave names on the roll that has nobody there because it creates an invitation to the machine, whatever kind of machine you're dealing with, to start cheating and go out and find dead people and vote them, or go out and find people who moved away and vote them. Well, that's just a huge invitation for somebody to come in and cheat. If we go next from the state where I was born, Pennsylvania, to the state where I lived and served in Congress, Georgia, again, you have an interesting pattern. There's a 14,000 vote difference out of 4.9 million votes cast. And I must say, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger has now announced, quote, with the margin being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in every county. This will help build confidence. It will be an audit, a recount, and a canvass all at once. I really think that's very important. And I think all of these contested states should have a hand recount, which is a canvass. It's very different than just having the kind of automatic recount where you put the same things through the computer and the computer comes up with the same answer. Because what you're doing is you're examining the ballots to find out whether or not they should be put in the computer. So when he announced on Saturday that there was an issue with certain ballots in Fulton County later issued a statement revealing that, quote, some ballots were not captured in Friday night's vote update, and that a smaller number of ballots were not scanned. Now notice, when they say not captured, that meant they didn't count as a vote. And if they weren't scanned, they didn't count as a vote. So the commission went on to say, quote, out of an abundance of caution, all provisional, military, and uniformed and overseas citizens' ballots scanned on Friday, November 6th will be rescanned. The uploads made last night will be pulled and replaced with tonight's rescanned file. I think we're going to learn a great deal more as they go through this one step at a time process in Georgia, and particularly since Georgia has 2 U.S. Senate runoffs, it's really important that we be certain that the election in Georgia is accurate and honest and that people are not able to steal it. In Arizona, Biden's margin keeps shrinking, and he is now only 11,665 votes ahead out of 3.3 million votes that were cast. And according to the election code, a recount is automatically triggered if the difference between the two candidates is 0.1%. So they're really clearly moving in that direction. This, remember, was a state that was reported as being for Biden by a big margin on election night because there was no way to have Trump win. What happened apparently was that Edison Research, which was used by a number of outlets, showed 98% of the vote was in, but it was actually 86%. So instead of having 2% to catch up, Trump actually had 14%. The map and results have been corrected now, but we don't really know where the mistake happened. And that night, it was a serious blow in morale and a serious blow in trying to establish the legitimacy of Biden. According to the Trump lawsuit in Arizona, it is their belief that up to thousands of qualified voters in Maricopa County had their ballots rejected by the tabulation device due to apparent overvote or other defects. What happened was they had people would go in and vote, and when they would mess up their ballot, instead of having them complete a new ballot, they would tell them, oh, go ahead and just fix it. And then they said, press this green button and it'll be okay. Well, it turns out when you press the green button, it actually disqualifies your vote. Gina Swoboda, an Arizona State Election Day Operations Director, who oversaw and participated in the Election Day phone operations in Arizona, had several phone calls from voters who attempted to cast their vote. It's her understanding that several poll workers clicked the green button for the machine to accept the ballot without allowing the voter to review or correct the ballot. They were not informed that pressing the red button would allow them to review their ballots if they needed to be corrected. Colin Willoughby, an Arizona voter who went to a Phoenix voting center, observed many instances where the ballot was rejected, both that the machine would spit out the ballot or the ballot was held in the machine displaying a message. He says he witnessed about 80 instances where a poll worker provided a vague and or confusing explanation to the voter as to the nature of the problem and the consequences of pressing the red or green button. He also witnessed 40 instances where poll workers would click the green button on behalf of the voter. In one instance, a voter complained about this, and the poll worker told the voter that nothing was wrong. So Arizona has a lot of questions that really have to be answered before you could certify the state. In Wisconsin, which was close last time, close again this time, Biden was ahead by 20,000 votes out of 3.2 million votes. And there are huge mistakes in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Elections Commission said that clerks could fill in missing addresses for witnesses, stating that please note that the clerk should attempt to resolve any missing witness address information prior to Election Day if possible. And this can be done through reliable information, personal knowledge, voter registration information, through a phone call with the voter or witness. The witness does not need to appear to add a missing address. This explicitly violates Wisconsin Statute 6.876D, which states, quote, if a certificate is missing the address of a witness, the ballot may not be counted. And there are a series of other flaws in the way Wisconsin conducted the election. And I think that that particular recount will become very, very significant. One of the states that had the biggest problems was Nevada, where you have a Democratic governor, a Democratic state legislature, and they just passed a law this year that basically made it wide open and made it easy to steal and did everything they could to make it possible for the machine, including sending out ballots to everybody in the state, whether they asked for it or not. The Nevada GOP sent criminal referral to Attorney General Barr regarding at least 3,062 instances of voter fraud of individuals who voted after they moved from Nevada. According to the Nevada GOP, when they sent that, they had found individuals who have been identified to have cast ballots in Nevada after they moved away from the state. They also shared a photo of a mail-in ballot from Washoe County, along with a caption that claimed 4 mail-in ballots were cast by voters under age 18, with 1 registered as a Democrat and 3 registered with no party affiliation. Clark County, which is the biggest part of the state, it's in Las Vegas, it actually lowered the factory setting on their signature verification machines. So you're supposed to have something, say, an 80% likelihood that the signature is right. They downgraded that down to 40, which means as long as it's vaguely similar, it's going to be counted. Now, a U.S. federal court judge rejected the emergency notion from Nevada Republicans regarding this issue, But in fact, I think it's going to go back again to court. And it's just one of many things. We have a number of folks we've been talking to who have been in Nevada on the ground, and the number of stories they tell about vote theft, about the former Attorney General Adam Laxalt told me personally the other day that there are at least 600,000 ballots that no Republican has ever seen. And so you begin to think about the possibility of finally getting a chance to review 600,000 ballots. And you begin to wonder if Nevada also is going to turn out to be a problem, because they had a difference of 36,000 votes and they have 600,000 that we've never actually reviewed. So I think that Nevada still has to be seen as a very dubious state with a terrible record of this kind of vote corruption. Michigan, which was close last time, is probably the least likely of the 6 contested states to switch. There was a software glitch. According to the Michigan Secretary of State, a software mistake in Antrim County, Michigan, gave Joe Biden thousands of votes, led him to be declared the county winner, but it was caused by an error when the county clerk did not update the software used to collect voting machine data and report unofficial results. Now, what's sobering about that is the Dominion voting system, who made the machine for Antrim County, is used in a majority of American states. The company boasts on its website having customers in 28 states, including 9 of the top 20 counties and 4 of the top 10 counties throughout the country. So I think it's really important to look at and realize that we don't fully understand how some of these technical glitches occur and how hard they'd be to track down. Similarly, there were 7 precincts that were not counted because, according to Oakland County Clerk Lisa Brown, Adam Kokendorfer, a Republican running for the Board of Commissioners, went from losing his reelection to winning after officials discovered a technical glitch where results from 7 precincts had been counted twice. The final corrected count moved Kokendorfer from a 104 vote loss to an 1,127 vote victory. And that's part of why, when you look across the whole country, you begin to realize we may have to have a whole new model for how we watch over these machines, because it's so easy to find ways to cheat with them. Now, Bill Stepien, who is the Trump campaign manager, reported, quote, President Trump's campaign had not been provided with meaningful access to numerous counting locations to observe the opening of ballots and the counting process as guaranteed by Michigan law. And I would say that Detroit rivals Philadelphia as the center of corrupt election processes, and that anytime you see a place where the machine was keeping you out, you had to assume bad things were going on. They weren't just keeping you out for fun. They were keeping you out in order to do bad things. Now, the presidential election process will continue, and it will be, I think, several weeks at least before we have a final resolution. I think that's very important if we're going to reestablish the faith of the American people. It's very important that we count every vote, and we make sure that every legal vote is counted and no illegal vote is counted. But while we're counting the votes from the presidential election, we also have to remember that there is an extraordinary runoff in Georgia involving 2 United States Senate seats. Now, if President Trump does end up losing, the runoffs in Georgia may establish the balance of power in the Biden administration. We've already had a great run in the House, which has picked up seats. Nancy Pelosi's margin is much thinner than it was before the election. She's going to have a very hard time keeping her troops together. And Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader from California, is, I think, going to basically be able to fight with her every day for control of the House floor, because House Democrats know that the last 2 times they elected a president, the following election was a disaster. In the 1990s, when Bill Clinton won, 2 years later, we came back with a contract with America, and we picked up 53 seats. And for the first time in 40 years, we were the majority. A few years later, you had Barack Obama winning. 2 years later, in 2010, John Boehner led the campaign based on where are the jobs. and they picked up 63 seats. I'd been very proud that we'd won 53 seats in a reaction to the Clinton presidency, but Boehner did even better and got 63 seats. So if you're out there now as a Democrat, you've been told you're going to gain seats this year, you lost seats. You look at the Civil War opening up between you and the other wing of the party. So if you're a moderate, you're in a fight with the socialist left wing. If you're a left-winger, you're in a fight with the moderates. All this is just going to get worse. And looming over them is the prospect of a massive Republican victory in 2022 if Biden wins. Well, the other place that this really matters is the Senate, because if McConnell, who now already has 50 Republican senators, if he can win one or two of these two Senate seats in Georgia, he is in great shape to then be the fulcrum for everything that happens in Washington, because he'll have the votes in the Senate to be in control of virtually everything. And that's why I want to spend just a minute or two wrapping up with talking about why Georgia matters, why I hope you will get involved. I hope you'll go to WinRed or some other system. But this is really extraordinary. I don't remember any time when you've had this kind of runoff with the potential of such a huge impact on the balance of power. If the Republicans were to lose both of these seats, then Kamala Harris as the vice president would be the deciding vote, and the Democrats would organize the Senate. If we win one or two of these seats, either way, we are the majority. And obviously, if you're Mitch McConnell, you'd like to win both of them, because you don't want to try to govern just with a one-seat majority, because then you have to worry every day about who might stray off the reservation. So what is up in Georgia? Well, Senator Kelly Loeffler, who was appointed, ended up in a runoff with Raphael Warnock. Now, she is a very attractive, very intelligent woman. This is her first big race. She got into the runoff. Warnock, who was the person the Democrats had rallied around as a very left-wing Democrat, one used to work at a church which had welcomed Fidel Castro, had also been involved in a series of radical positions. Raphael Warnock got 32.9% of the vote. People thought at one time he could get up to the mid-40s. But I think as Georgians got to realize how truly radical he is, I think that Kelly has a great opportunity to win, and maybe win by a surprising margin. The other is, of course, incumbent Senator David Perdue, who's in a runoff against John Ossoff. Ossoff is a huge fundraiser. He's a real favorite of the Hollywood crowd. Ossoff got 48% of the vote. Perdue got 49.7%. And there was a third-party candidate, I think a libertarian, who got the additional amount. So Georgia has a rule that you have to get a majority of the vote to win the election. If no one does, the top two finishers advance to a runoff. And the runoff is going to be on January 5th. Voters must be registered to participate by December 7th. I believe that this is going to be extraordinarily important. I think the difference between Schumer as the majority leader working with Biden and Harris to raise taxes, to have gun control, to have tax-paid abortion, just go down the list of all the things you know they want. That's one world. McConnell with the majority, negotiating with Biden and limiting Biden's interests. Biden could not pack the Supreme Court if McConnell's the majority leader. So there's huge reasons, including just in your own pocketbook, you're not going to get a big tax increase through a Mitch McConnell Senate, but you are going to get a big tax increase through a Chuck Schumer Senate. So there are lots of reasons to want to make sure we win. You'll be able to go to our show page and you'll see the address to WinRed. If you get a chance, I think it's a very, very worthwhile cause to help the party in this last great effort this year. So this is one of the most amazing elections in American history. I just wanted to share with you this overview of all the different things you have to be aware of. And I think that you should stay tuned, because the truth is we don't know what the next act is going to be like. We don't know how all these recounts are going to go. And we have this extraordinary double runoff in Georgia. So a lot to pay attention to in the next few weeks. And in other podcasts, I'll try to come back and offer reports and analysis as things develop. So if you want to be more active and you want to get involved, take a look at winred.com, which is the official donation platform of the Republican Party. We will have the links for you on our show page. Take a look at it and see what you think. Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Debbie Myers, and our producer is Garnes Islam. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. Please email me with your questions at gingrich360.com/questions. I'll answer a selection of them in future episodes. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcast and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.